最近どう
Good. Everything's good. How about yourself?
まあかな。普通に何事もなく引っ越しするから、引っ越しの準備をちょっとしてるかなって感じで、ちょっと物捨てたりとか。
Yeah, moving is not the easiest.
いやまあいきなりちょっと本題に入っていきたんやけど、和也って、カナダで生まれてカナダで育ってるやん。やっぱでも和也って名前で見た目もやっぱり日本人っぽいやん。
Yeah, and my last name's also Fukusaku.
福作和也ですごい日本人っぽくて、やっぱり日本に行ったらさ、やっぱり和也はなんかカナダ人やのに多分日本人としてやっぱりすごい見られると思うねんけど、なんかそういう面でなんか日本に行った時とかになんかちょっと困ったこととかある？
A lot. It's difficult because, like you said, I look Japanese. I have a Japanese name, and my speaking is okay for like introduction.
まあでも和也日本語だいぶ上手い方と思う。
For introduction, it's fine, but that's the hard part. So it's probably better if I don't speak any Japanese at all.
そういうことね。
Yeah, because when I speak Japanese and they expect me to be Japanese, and then because I look Japanese, they also set that expectation on me to know the rules, to know the culture, to know the language, and like language to an extent I know, but the culture is it's very different, right? I mean, I know like the basic culture, but there's a lot I don't know.
難しい。日本とか特になんかいっぱいあるもんな。
There's a lot, especially the rules.
ルール
So
多いな。
that was the hardest for me is knowing the rules. Like one big example that I have is one time I was in the car with my mom and my auntie, and then we were driving to a mall, and then my auntie was driving, and then she rolled down. No. She was driving regularly, and there was a bad driver, and the driver cut her off. So what I did was I rolled down the window and I started yelling at the driver. And then my auntie got very angry at me.
カナディアンやな。
Yeah.
カナディアンやな。
So then she got very angry at me. She was like, "You can't do that here." I was like, "How come?" It's because in Canada that happens a lot,
カ
right?
ナダ多いな。カ
Yeah.
ナダなんかすぐ叫ばれんもんな。
Yeah.
ようなんか窓から首で出る人いっぱいおるもんな。
Yeah. Or they raise up their hand and give you the finger,
中
or
指立ててる。
yeah, or they honk at you. But that doesn't happen in Japan, right?
日本は少ないな。あるっちゃあるけどな。
Yeah, so then my auntie got very angry at me.
あ、そうなんや。
Yeah, I mean, I was also relatively young too. I was still in high school at that time. But you see that often here.
せやな。
But in Japan, I guess you don't see it very often. So that was probably one of the big examples of.
じゃあやっぱりなんかそういう難しいことがいっぱいあるから和也はやっぱりいつもその外国人として言ってるんや。その英語で喋って
I try
で
to.
それでなんか外国人やったらってところはちょっとあるやん。なんか若干
Yeah.
最近ちょっと厳しいけどな。
I mean, it's hard. It's hard because I can only do that when I talk to them, right? So if they talk to me, then they'll be like, "Oh, he's not from Japan."
まあわかるよな。
Yeah, but then if I don't talk, and it's my actions that cause me to do something inappropriate or cause me to do something against the cultural rule in Japan, then they have that expectation. Like,
なあやっぱそういう目で見られちゃうよな。
yeah, there was this one time when we were entering a school, and then I walked in with my shoes on. But I don't know either. I had no idea you had to take your shoes off, right? But in Japan, you have to take your shoes off, and then you put on your slippers, and then you go into the school. But I had no idea because you don't take off your shoes in Canadian schools. So I walked in with my shoes on, and then I'll get in trouble, of course, because you're not supposed to wear shoes.
いやそうよな。
Yeah.
そうよな。
And then another example was when I used to work out a lot more. I went to a fitness center to work out, and then there was this one time where I had no idea you had to bring your own indoor shoes.
日本せやな。ジムそうやな。
Yeah.
あるな。そういう場所な。
Yeah, so you have to bring your own indoor shoes to even work out. But you don't bring indoor shoes here. Like you might bring like running shoes to a gym just to use, as an exercise because it's hard to run in like different kind of footwear. But you can still use the same shoes you wore outside. But in Japan, you can't do that.
せやな。なんか日本やったら結構なんかそこジムまで行く靴と、はい、ジム入った時用の靴みたいな。
Yes. So that was also one of the things that was difficult. And then another time when I was working out at a gym, I was doing the lat pull down on a machine, but I wasn't doing it facing forward. I was doing it facing outside.
OK。
Yeah,
じ
so
ゃ
I
あ
was
椅子がこうあって、
yeah
でもこっち向きにやってた
yeah yeah. I was facing that side
Mm.
and then going behind my head.
OK。
Which it doesn't really matter because I can still be facing the other way and still
Yeah.
doing it. And then a fitness trainer comes up to me and she tells me I'm doing it wrong. And then I ask her why, right? And then she just says that's not how you do it.
Oh.
But I ask her why, right? But she can't give me an answer. So I guess in Japan a lot of people don't ask why.
あー
So usually when they're told something, they obey and they follow and they don't ask questions.
そうやな、なんか日本やったらそんななんでなんでって聞くんはなんかあんま良くない感じもするしな。
Yeah,
なん
but
か日本人としたら。
in the West, a lot of people ask why
Mm.
and ask questions, which I like a lot.
俺もすごいいいことと思う、それは。
Yeah, I think it's very good. So then at the gym, I asked her why. I was like, how come in Japanese, right? And then she couldn't explain why I had to do it because she didn't know why people had to do it.
Yeah.
She just knew that wasn't the proper way to do it. But she didn't know why, right? And then I mean, I was like, whatever. Like, there's no like, I don't need to start anything
yeah.
at a Japanese gym, right?
Yeah.
So I just turned around and just did it regularly.
うん。
But yeah, there was like those kind of examples too, where
まあ、せやな、なんか結構そういうの日本人ってなんかなんでって聞くのをちょっと怖がる人多いかもしれん。それこそ学校でとか、
Yeah.
サッカースポーツでとかもあると思うし、でもなんか俺がこっち来てすごい思うのは、なんかなんでって聞いたら多分こっちの人はもうすごい優しくなんかすごい全部教えてくれるなんか感じがしてて、なんかすごいその面ではやっぱりこっち来てからなんかなんでって言っていいんやってすごい思った、あっちもなんか They say like happy to help you とか、
yeah.
なんかそんな感じで喜んで助けてくれるっていうのがすごい分かったから、なんか質問していいんやってマインドになって、学校とかでもなんか分からんことあったら全部聞いたりとか、スポーツとかでもコーチに全部聞いたりとか、なんか意外とそうやな、やっぱ日本ってそういうカルチャーがあるんかな。なんかちょっと聞きにくいみたいな質問とか。
It is, yeah, I think they do. Even for my current occupation, for my job, we sometimes deal with Japanese clients as well. And what happens often is they don't ask questions. So we kind of have to assume that they understand. But a lot of the times they don't understand. And it's a lot easier for us if they just ask the question so that we know what they don't understand, so that we can clearly explain so that they understand, and you know that there's good communication between us and our client. But what happens a lot is they don't ask the questions, and so we don't, of course we can't read their minds, so we don't answer the questions, and then they're confused about a certain thing. But it's like, just can you just ask the question? Because if you ask the question, then we know what to explain, and so we know what we need to clarify so that it's clear. But unless you ask the question, we don't know.
そうよな、なんか結構それ日本とカナダですごい違う部分な気もするな。なんかやっぱりカナダ俺来てからすごい思うんは、なんか俺が質問しんかったら、そういう先生とかコーチは俺が分かってるっていうあれで来てるから、もうなんか聞かんかったらもう別に助けてくれへんし、
No.
もうだから自分から行ってしないと、あっちはもう俺がもう分かってるっていう前提でもう話しちゃってるから、もうどんどんことが進んじゃうんよ、だからほんまに留学とか今からする人とか海外とか行く人とかもう全然聞いちゃっていいと思うな。
Yes,
もう何でも
ask a lot of questions, and it's fine. Like, I mean, I'm not sure what it's like in Japan to ask questions, but in Canada, everybody asks questions, right? So it's fine to ask questions. It's good to ask questions. If you don't know, just ask. If you don't know what to ask, just ask what you need to ask. It's like just keep asking questions. I mean, of course, if it's like something like very, you know, like you don't something unnecessary, you don't need to
Yeah.
ask. But if it's something you genuinely do not know and you want to know how, then you should ask without hesitating.
そう俺結構学校とかでもなんかやっぱカナダっていう地に日本人として行ってるから、なんかカナダ人の子たちはみんなこれ分かってるんやってなんか錯覚してて、だからなんか俺が今こんなところでこんなアホな質問していいんかなとかすごい思ってたけど、同じ俺の思ってる質問とかをカナディアンの人とかも全然してるから、
Yeah.
あね、意外とそうみんなも分かってないんやみたいな、いい意味でな、分かってないんやって思って、でなんか俺もすごい質問しだして、 でやっぱりこっちって結構こっちの先生とかってなんかすごい質問とかしてあっちがなんかすごい They say like oh that's such a good question とかなんかいっぱいすごいなんか質問したことにすごい褒めてもらえる時があって、なんかそういう経験があって俺はすごいなんかあすごいこの先生すごい質問しやすいなってなったりそういう時はあんまなんか日本で質問して褒められたことあんまりないかな、まあでも人によるかもしれんけど、俺はあんまりなかったなとかいうのもあるよな。なんか結構意外と日本とカナダで違うよな。
Yeah, there's that big difference with asking questions. And yeah, the time when I was at the gym, that was interesting.
まあすごい違う経験やな。やっぱ多分ジムの人も多分和也がまあ多分日本人として見てるような和也のことを
For sure, because I'm sure if I was Western, if I was white and really jacked, she would not have said a single thing. She definitely wouldn't have said anything. But because I look Japanese and of course like I wasn't like that muscular either. She came up and told me, but I'm sure if I was like, African or something, she wouldn't have said anything to me.
そうよな。やっぱ日本とかやっぱり特にやっぱカナダはさすごいなんか結構もうみんな分かってるというかなんかカナディアンでもやっぱ和也みたいな日本人の見た目の人もおるし中国人の人韓国人の人とかもどの見た目でもカナダで生まれ育ったそれがアイデンティティやん。
Yeah.
やっぱそれがやっぱり日本はまあ少しずつは増えてきてるとは思うけどやっぱりまだ少ないからそういうアイデンティティに関しての問題とかだから日本人からしたらカナダ人イコールそういう白人のこととか思いついたりとかすると思うからなんかやっぱそういうなんかイメージとかはすごい日本人多いと思うな。
I mean, these are only just some slight examples of what I personally faced. But I know many other people that have lived there, but they were born and raised in Canada, and lived in Japan for a few years. That's experienced a lot more difficulties because they look Japanese, they have a Japanese name, and they can speak Japanese to a pretty good level. But when they go to Japan, they deal with many difficulties and hardships because they don't understand the culture. And they don't understand how to do things in Japan. Especially if you're living there and you're working there, it's very different.
そうよな。なんかワークカルチャーとかもあるし普通の日本のカルチャーとかもあるし、
Yeah.
特に日本って結構そういうの厳しいイメージもあるし
I think so.
そういうおじいちゃんとかおばあちゃんとかそういう人たちってなんか結構すごい厳しいマナーとか礼儀とかにすごい厳しい人とかもおるしでも多分それが多分そういう他の国の違う見た目の人とかアジア人とかじゃなかったらやっぱりあんま言わんと思うな。
No, I don't think so. Like, for example, if I went to Japan and started working in a company, it's 5 p.m. I'm off work and I just leave, right? And the boss is still there. Everyone would look at me differently because of the way I look and because of my name. But if I was like a Western person, like if I was white and I was working in a Japanese company, it's 5 o'clock, I leave. They might think something, but they'll be like, oh, but he's Western, so it's fine for him because he doesn't know. But then for someone like me who looks Japanese and can speak Japanese and has a Japanese name to go there and just to have the same actions, there'll probably be a lot more like difficulties and there'd be a lot more people looking down on me for the actions I took. But just because I'm Japanese, right? So I mean, I haven't experienced on a personal level, so I can't say per se, but I'm sure that people have experienced that. So
まあすごい難しいことも多いけどやっぱりなんか俺がすごい和也見てて思うのはなんかやっぱカナダで生まれ育った日本人親が日本人で名前も日本人ででもなんかやっぱりカナダで生まれ育ってきたその環境とかもあってやっぱ中身はカナダ人やんすごいあんま日本人っぽくないやんいい意味で、でやっぱそういうのもあるおかげでやっぱりこっちに来た日本人とか特に俺とか、そういう留学生の日本人とかとすごい関わりやすない。
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier because we have something in common. Yeah, because I have the like Japanese background. Yeah, and so I enjoy the same kind of food. I can speak the language to like a certain extent.
それでこっちにおったらさやっぱりなんかちょっと全然日本のマナーとかなってなくてもさ
Yeah, it's fine.
普通やん
Yeah.
そういうカナダおるしみたいなであっちも多分理解してるし
Yeah.
でももし和也が日本に行くってなったらまた話違ってくるよね
Yeah, very different. it'll be a whole different story, I think.
そうよな、まあ、あっちはもう和也を日本人として見てるからな。
Yeah.
やっぱりでもこのカルチャー少しずつ変わってきてるとは思うねんな。
Perhaps. I mean, probably in those like bigger cities like Tokyo, I'm sure it is changed because of the significant increase in tourism and foreigners coming into Japan. So I mean, I'm sure it's a lot different now. But yeah, because I mean, I haven't faced it so much recently, but it was when I was a lot younger, when I was in high school, so about like 7-8 years ago, that I really experienced these changes.
Yeah.
So, or
そう
these
やな、最近
difficulties.
になってすごい良くなってると思うな。それこそ俺らみたいにポッドキャストしてるゴールデンラッシュ
Yeah,
ポッドキャストの
yeah,
人とか、あの人とかもすごいそういうアイデンティティの話とかずっとしてたりしてて、でやっぱりああいうポッドキャストがすごい日本で大きくなってきてるから、やっぱりそういう影響もあって多分なんか結構日本の人たちもなんかそういう話に触れる機会が増えてるか
That
ら、
is true. That is
め
true.
ちゃめちゃそれはいいことと思うな。
I think so too. I think it's good to kind of understand different cultures and different, you know, backgrounds and ethnicities and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think it's really good.
やっぱこんなこと言ったら多分またいっぱいコメント来そうやけどなんかでもやっぱりやっぱり日本ってやっぱりすごいいいことすごい素敵な文化があるやん。で
Yes.
その文化をやっぱりなんで外国人入れてそれを文化を変えなあかんねんとかも言う人おるけど、やっぱりなんかやっぱそのバランスってすごい難しいなって思う。
It is
Study.
difficult.
まあそりゃなんかこれからも多分その外国人が増えたりとかハーフの人が増えたりとかしてくると思うけど、やっぱその人たちはその人でまあ生まれ育ってきたカルチャーとかアイデンティティとかもあるし、なんかそれをやっぱりなんか受け入れていくのってやっぱすごい日本が多分世界でもトップレベルで難しい国とは思うな。
It is hard. I mean, it's you know, it's like that's what it means to go to a different country, right? Is to embrace the culture and to establish that culture rather than bringing your own culture. And that's what I always have to remind myself when I go to Japan is that I'm in Japan. I should be following Japanese rules. I'm in a Japanese culture. I should do my best to learn the culture and to adapt to that culture.
それがマジで大事と思う。
Yeah, because I mean, like, I think the same way for people that come from different countries to Canada and they bring their culture. It does frustrate me at times when I see people acting a certain way because they acted that way in their country, right? But they can act that way in their country back at their country,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of the people that came to Canada in the first place was to leave the country to either start a different life or because even the culture that they might have not liked in their own country. So they leave that to start a new life in Canada. But if you bring that culture to Canada, then you're just bringing what you were trying to leave behind, right? So that's why every time I go to Japan, I try to think, you know, there's many different things. There's things that I think is right, I think it's wrong, but that doesn't matter. It's what's important is for me to adapt to that culture and to do what's best for the people because I'm being welcomed into that country. So
そうやっぱアダプトするのがすごい大事よな。
Yeah.
やっぱ結構移民の人とかってすごい自分のそのカルチャーをそのまま持ってきちゃおうとするから、多分その面で多分日本人がすごい怒ることが多い。だから普通に多分してて、でやっぱ日本のそういうカルチャーとかを知りながら何をそういうルールとかもまあ少しずつでもいいけど学んでいってたりしたら、多分別に日本人何も思わんと思う。
yeah.
けど多分一気にガーってきて、でそのみんながそのカルチャーを持ってきちゃってるのが多分すごい日本を変えてる気がするから。
Yeah, that's what people don't like, which is understandable.
そう今やっぱそうやな、まあ少しずつほんま良くなっていったらいいなとは思うけどな。
Yeah, I mean the most difficult thing for me to this day is the language and using Keigo.
いや敬語な、
So Keigo is the hardest for me.
だってあんま使うところもないもんな、こっちおったら
Yeah,
な。
like I don't practice Keigo, and I don't learn Keigo, right? I can know like the basic, but I don't really learn it, and so that's what is the most difficult for me. Is because especially when I go to Japan and speak Japanese, it's very difficult because I always have to think about what to say, and have to really, you know, be intentional with how I speak.
Yeah.
So it's quite difficult. That's why I like to speak in English or either start off by telling them that I'm from Canada and I don't speak much Japanese. So if I lay that expectation first, then they understand, okay, it's okay if he doesn't speak proper English or proper Japanese. But when I start with Japanese, without saying anything like that,
Yeah.
then they or I mean it's rude, you know. It's just it's
そうやな。
generally rude.
そうやな。
If I can speak regularly but not speak in Keigo,
うん
right? So that's what I'm still working on right now.
そやな、
But
なんか言葉ってほんまに人傷つけちゃうこととかもいっぱいあるからな。なんか
Yeah,
それは
I mean, when you
すごい
come-
難しいところ
yeah,
だな
when you come to Canada, it's not that big of an issue, I would think. I mean, of course, if you're like swearing the whole time,
Yeah.
then that's a little different. But if you just try to speak regularly, and even if you don't speak it well, it's not rude, right?
そうだからやっぱり英語ってそういう敬語がある国とかと比べたらやっぱすごい、まあ、簡単な方とは思う俺英語を学
It
ぶの
is, it is, it is.
やっぱり英語ってやっぱそういうのがないおかげでやっぱ誰とでも同じように話せるやん
Yeah.
だからその結果やっぱりいっぱい話すことになって、
Uh-huh.
ですごい俺もすぐ学べた英語は、
Yeah.
でもなんかその日本語を学ぶって考えたらそんなだって敬語使えんかったらちょっと失礼になっちゃうやん、
Yeah.
だから失礼になるって考えたらちょっと喋りづらくない
It is
ちょ
a
っと
little
シャイになっちゃう
difficult.
くない、
Yeah.
なんかうわーこれで傷つけたらどうしようみたいな
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I don't
トライし
wanna.
にくいよな。
Yeah, I don't wanna, hurt, be rude,
Mm.
and I don't wanna say something inappropriate or say things in a way that would make them feel uncomfortable.
うん
Just because it's not without me realizing it, right? So that is definitely something that I'm still really working towards and having a difficulty. Even in Canada, sometimes when I speak to Japanese people, it can be a little difficult because
Yeah.
I know that they're thinking about, oh, he's not speaking to me properly,
うん
which I don't really care too much. But like I said, it comes down to the point where I don't want to disrespect them,
いやー
right? And I want to be respectful to them.
そうよ
So
な
that's why even the Japanese people I meet in Canada, I try to speak English to them first, so that they know that I'm like born and raised here. So that if I speak broken Japanese, they just find it funny.
いや
Like, it's okay if they find it funny. I don't really mind if they laugh at me or anything, but I don't want them to be like disrespected,
そうや
right?
な、
So-
もう先にもう英語で喋っちゃうか、もう
Yeah.
ちょっと日本語下手なんですって、まあ
Yeah,
最
yeah,
初に伝え
yeah,
てたら
yeah.
全然大丈夫と思うな、
Yeah.
それで怒る日本人はおらんと思う、
Yeah,
うん
yeah.
だからもうみんなはそれは多分すごい理解してると思うしな、
Mm.
せやな、まあ結構いろいろ日本あるけど、まあまた敬語の動画とかでも作れたらいいな
We should, yeah.
な、やっぱ敬語すごい大事やからな、日本で。まあ、
Yeah.
まあ大事やな。
I mean, it's good practice. It's good to know,
Mm.
and just to be able to show utmost respect to the Japanese people when you're there.
せやな、
Right.
まあまたみんないっぱいコメントしてくれるようやったら、敬語のやつとか撮ろうか。
Sure,
OK。
sounds good.
じゃあ、こんぐらいで。
Awesome.
バイバイ。